Hi, my name is Linda Farr-Darling. I'm in the Department of Curriculum and Pedagogy here in the Faculty of Education. Rita Irwin and a few other people, including Mindy, who's filming this right now, hello, have asked me to talk about my recent presentation in the Faculty of Education at the CREATE seminar. And my topic for that session was nurturance and critique. So what I wanted to do this morning is to give about a 5 or 10 minute rundown of some of the major ideas and themes that I talked about. And I'll preface that by saying that my purpose for the seminar was really to open up this year's conversation more widely between the kinds of people who show up at such seminars for the CREATE group. So among the people who were there that day were some long-time teacher educators who have been with the Faculty of Education in various capacities for a number of years, including some faculty advisors, and we had some long-time sessionals attending, as well some full-time faculty from several departments, and a few administrators as well. So it was a really nice mix of those people. I noticed a few staff members as well, and then importantly there were a few graduate students whom I knew who also came to join the discussion. The theme that I picked to open this CREATE seminar series this year was nurturance and critique in teacher education, in teacher preparation. And the reason I chose that theme is because it becomes such a perennial tension for teachers and teacher educators when they're talking about their relationships and roles and responsibilities with students. We all know that we are in the business of preparing teachers for a particular kind of identity formation. We're preparing the conditions for them to develop into certain kinds of people who interact with children and youth and adults if we're working with adult populations. And we know that we have various kinds of responsibilities that seem to fit in two camps that don't always sit easily with one another. The first camp might be called the nurturing camp, or the nurturing set of responsibilities. We have responsibilities to support students, to nurture them along, to initiate them into the kinds of practices that we want them to start developing for themselves, and initiating them into a world where certain capacities and certain qualities are paramount working with students. Those might include compassion and sensitivity towards students, empathy, the kinds of giving and generosity of spirit that we often see in teachers who work so well with students and interact with them so well on many levels. On the other side, or on the flip side of that coin, are a corollary set of responsibilities which have to do with what one philosopher calls the virtues or capacities for conscientiousness. And those have more expressly to do with evaluation and judgment and what I call critique. So when I talk about nurturance and critique, I'm talking about two sets of capacities and two sets of responsibilities that we have in our roles as teacher educators that we all know about, but we sometimes are uneasy talking about and deliberating about because we find the first so easy. We find the generosity of spirit, cultivating certain kinds of compassionate relations, so natural for us. And yet we find the others, the capacities and qualities or virtues of conscientiousness, as opposed to benevolence, to be so difficult sometimes. Now this may take on a particular salience when we talk about teacher education that has organized itself into cohort programs. My own experience, and this is what I drew on for my talk, was my stories from the Community of Inquiry for Teacher Education, which I co-founded with Tony Clark, Galen Erickson, Heather Kelleher, Karen Meyer, way back in 1998 with the immeasurably invaluable help of Judy Paley, who was our first staff person secretary, and a few graduate students, notably among them Jane Mitchell, who is now back in her native Australia working in teacher ed, And at that time, we thought that a useful metaphor and a useful organizational strand would be community of inquiry for teacher education. That what we really needed to do was to create a community of teacher educators, school-based professionals, including principals and our sponsor teachers or school advisors, and of course the teacher candidates that we were working with. In those first few years, when we were rather kind of messing about conceptually and theoretically with this idea, we really were going for a particular conception of community that saw as its focus and goal helping to bring teacher candidates into a circle of inquiry, where the focus of inquiry would be, or the object of inquiry, would be practices in teacher education, practices in teaching. So we focused a lot of our program around that central idea, and then immediately noticed there was a tension that emerged, somewhat like the nurturance and critique tension which I began the talk with. And that is, while we were very good at supporting students, at developing relationships, at helping them develop collegial and peer relationships, at getting collaborative projects going, at looking at inquiry into teaching practices, we were very good at setting those things up. What we weren't so good at is stepping in and intervening and actually evaluating and critiquing students' performance, because the relationships which we had cultivated were so close and ended up being so much a part of everyone's identity in that project that we sometimes, I think, fail to powerfully intervene as pedagogues, helping students actually see where they were mistaken or see where they had to get better at doing things. So I think that was actually the site of my stories for this talk. Now, I talked about ways I think that we actually can productively bring critique and nurturance together within the same program, the same project, the same teacher education cohort. I think the first thing we have to do, and I only have time to outline these today, the first thing we have to do is really acknowledge the essential relational quality of our being together in a community, whether it be a community of inquiry or what our students saw as a community of support or a community of compassion. We have to really acknowledge the relational quality of our being together in that space, and that the borders are actually rather permeable between teacher educators and teacher candidates who are adults with a wealth of experience and expertise and a wealth of talents, often diverse talents, and that it's our diverse perspectives and our multiple situatedness or situatednesses that actually brings a great deal of richness and a great deal of possibility for critique to that community. But it's critique of a certain sort. It's based on respect. It's based definitely in the idea that we all are taking ownership for this project. We're all in it together. And I think if SITE succeeded at all, my community of inquiry for teacher education, shared with so many educators over the year, if it succeeded at all, it succeeded in being a project where we all felt at one time or another during the year, we are all in this together. And we are all up against the same kinds of tensions, the same kind of what Bruner called antinomies that don't always sit easily with each other. And that sometimes the borders are permeable, and that we really do learn a lot from our teacher candidates. They teach us a lot. They teach us a lot about the capacities we need, the patience, the generosity, the loving that we need to have as we're approaching any educational task, love of inquiry, love of knowledge, love of the fellow teachers we are working with. But we also need those capacities for conscientiousness brought within a spirit where we really do have respect and we really do have a spirit of collaboration. We are all in this together. The second thing I talked about, and then I can only just briefly characterize here, is that students really need to have us be more solidly immersed in a culture of self-study. Because once they see that we are philosophers of our own teacher education, they will be more likely, more inclined, more curious about, more inspired to be philosophers of their own education. That's a phrase that Ann Diller and others have used over the years, and I think it's a really good one to characterize the kind of self-study we really want to see in our teachers and in our teacher candidates as they are learning that first year of teaching and learning that it's a lifelong pursuit, and that perennial tension between nurturance and critique is not something we answer for all time and all places, that we have to answer it within the places we work and live and have our being, and that we try to resolve those tensions along with a host of other tensions in light of the work we can do and the understandings we can share with everyone else who is sharing that pursuit. Now, the talk that day and hopefully this little clip of a video have inspired you to reawaken that conversation in your own world as you are embarking on your own self-study of teacher education or of education practices as a graduate student, as a teacher educator, as a person in the schools working as a professional in one capacity or another. I know that it engendered lots of interesting conversation at the CREATE seminar, and I'm looking forward to hearing the next one. And I thank you, Mindy, for making this possible.
Thank you very much.